Welcome back to the Team Orders podcast. My name is Victor.
And I'm Seb.
And Formula One is back. We've had a week off and so much has happened since we left China 2 weeks ago.
Jonathan Wheatley out at Audi. Ongoing investigation at Mercedes. Max Verstappen DNF'd from the GT3 race. All of this right before Suzuka and the spring break.
Yeah, it's kind of odd that we're getting a spring break after Suzuka. I feel like we've barely had any Formula One, and now we're going to take a 3-week break, a 5-week break. That's a long time without. I struggled just with 1 week off.
Yeah, Max Verstappen really struggled with 1 week off, as we saw him. he just get a break from F1 and drive a Mercedes car.
Yeah, branded with Red Bull, which was quite funny to see. But we are back in Suzuka, Japan this weekend, and this is going to be quite an interesting race. This race is going to matter a lot more than in previous years because of the upcoming 5-week break that we get. Teams are going to have teams are going to have a chance to collect necessary data that they're going to take with them to the spring break to be able to work on their developments. And whoever leaves Suzuka with momentum is going to carry that momentum into the spring break.
I think this is going to be a very important race because this is going to be the last time we see the cars on track for 5 full weeks. And these 5 full weeks are going to be very important for the teams to keep learning about the car, try and keep developing, see what they can bring when we return to Miami. And it's not going to be, spring break as we say. I think the team's going to be very hard at work to continue improving each own's car, to just try and make a couple of tenths as we head to Miami.
Yeah, I think the spring break will benefit pretty much everybody except for Mercedes. I mean, obviously Mercedes will be working on their developments throughout the 5 weeks off, but it does give other teams a chance to catch up on basically every part of their car. And I think in Miami we're going to have a slightly closer battle between Mercedes and the rest of the field, and hopefully with Ferrari. I mean, Ferrari's most likely going to use Japan as a test session to test their Macarena wing, which they ended up not using in China, to our disappointment. But they're most likely going to use it to test it and then maybe implement it during the actual race in Miami, which will be very exciting to see if that happens.
Yeah, I think that would be the expectation, especially, they already tested it out in China, probably going to test it out here in Japan. And they're going to have 5 weeks to kind of perfect it or get it race ready for Miami. But I am very excited. I really hope that because there's a bit less straights with Japan, we might actually see a bit of a closer fight for P1. I know we've seen very interesting and close battles between the Mercedes and the Ferrari, but Mercedes still has that little bit extra more than Ferrari to push it over the finish line.
Right, so do you think that this is going to be a Mercedes inter-team battle more so than a Mercedes-Ferrari battle?
I do think so. We've seen that Kimi, he has fight and he wants to win races too. He finally got his first race win in China, and we saw on that radio after the race that his first goal was to win an F1 race. His second goal now is to be a world champion, and he has the car to do so. Now let's see if he can be mature enough to compete with George Russell week in and week out.
I think that will ultimately be the real test for him if he's able to keep his head throughout. I think that was a large part of the issue with Oscar Piastri last season, that he struggled a little bit on the mental side and his performance dipped quite a bit towards the end of the season, especially as Lando started to perform very well. So now the question begs, is this Russell's title to lose, or is Antonelli already a real threat inside the garage?
It's an interesting question because it depends on how long can Mercedes stay dominant with these new rule changes. We saw back in 2009 when Braun GP Jensen Button has such a very dominant car, and they basically dominated the complete first half of the season. That was enough just to kind of coast to the championship victory. So it'll be interesting to see if that's something similar for George and Kimi, and how long can they stay at the top. Because if I was the executives at F1, I don't want just to be a boring fight just between two Mercedes teammates. I want Ferrari, I want Red Bull, I want McLaren to also compete for race wins and for that championship. It will be good for the overall future of the sport.
Right, and Ferrari come in with 67 points currently to Mercedes 98 points, and so they're the closest in the drivers and constructors standings. Leclerc and Hamilton are separated by 1 point at the moment in the drivers' championship, and they've been mounting a real threat to Mercedes in the first 2 races of the season. So, can they mount a challenge here in Suzuka is the question, and I think this track favors a lot more driver skill rather than the car itself, due to the nature of the high tire degradation that there is at this track. In fact, Pirelli is bringing the hardest trio of tires to Suzuka. They're bringing the C1, C2, C3, the hardest trio in the range. So drivers will have a much more difficult time managing their tires. Now, a lot of this is down to the car as well, and how the car itself deals with tire wear, but most of it will be how skilled is the driver in managing those temperatures, managing the degradation throughout the many laps of Suzuka. We saw in Australia and in China that both the McLarens and the Red Bulls really struggled with tire management and degradation, especially towards the end of their stints. They were struggling quite a bit. We saw Max Verstappen unable to overtake Lando Norris in Australia. So they're aiming for a bounce-back weekend after 2 really disastrous weekends for both of the teams. Can they come away with something meaningful from Suzuka?
I think the first question there is Oscar Piastri going to start a race? That's the real question. Because, to score points, you got to actually finish the race. And to finish the race, you actually got to start the race.
Yeah.
That goes also for Lando, too. McLaren, get your stuff in together. For Red Bull, it'll be interesting to see how Max is after his GT3 race. Be like, did he learn anything from driving a Mercedes car? Can he bring that into his new Red Bull car? Maybe he can bring some better tire management. We know Max, he is one of the better drivers on the grid, and Suzuka is known for a very, demanding track, for the skill of the driver. It's not going to be so much reliant on, the engine power, the battery. I think it's going to be up to the actual skill of the driver, and Max Verstappen, you can't deny it. He has one of the best skills on the grid.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's going to do the best he can with the car that he has. I think this has to be a bounce-back weekend for Red Bull as a team. And if they don't, when is this Red Bull comeback going to start? Is it going to start in Miami? They're going to need to work very hard during the spring break to be able to bring a competitive package to Miami. And same goes for McLaren. If they really can't get it together in Japan and put together a decent result, then we could start calling this an early season crisis instead of kind of just 2 bad races.
Yeah, I think for Red Bull and McLaren, it's very important that they just stay in it. We're only 2 races in, having 3rd race weekend upcoming this weekend. Just make sure they are just still in range. I think that's very important. Just don't have another disaster. Get points on the board. Make sure they are in fighting distance when we get back from that 5-week break.
McLaren's sitting on 18 points. Red Bull is sitting on 12 points. And between the two, we have Haas with 17 points. Seb, I ask you this. Is this the weekend where Haas overtakes McLaren in the Constructors' Championship?
Victor, if their livery is to set the tone for their race pace this weekend, we could definitely see them overtaking McLaren because, oh my God, that Godzilla livery on that Haas is a thing of art.
Incredible.
Beauty.
Absolutely
That should
incredible.
be their livery all year round. I think every F1 car should have Godzilla on it. Absolute class. But it's going to be interesting to see with Haas. I think Ollie Behrman has been very quick, very good, but he's also taken advantage of a lot of retirements in the first two race weekends. So I think it'll be up to if Red Bull and McLaren can actually show up this race weekend and limit the amount of points Haas can take advantage.
Another team that started the season quite well was Audi. And now we have some big news coming out of the paddock that Jonathan Wheatley is gone.
Very shocking news when we start hearing the rumors with Wheatley. Is he actually gone out of Audi? Especially because I think he's done an absolute amazing job so far as he's been team principal there. And it's just such a shock to see the news that he is out of the team. And there's rumors that he might soon join Aston Martin, but we know there's kind of tension there with Daddy Stroll and Adrian Newey. Victor, what are your thoughts? Do you think Wheatley could be a good team principal at Aston Martin?
I think it's a very tricky situation because the reports are that him and Binotto were not getting along. There was a little too much ego involved maybe from Binotto, or there was a little too much red tape at the company. But if you look at Aston Martin, you have two of the biggest egos on the executive side at the team. You have obviously Lawrence Stroll, billionaire, and then you have Adrian Newey, the most successful engineer in F1 history, and who has been power hungry for the last couple of years. That's part of the reason why he left Red Bull as well. So between those two things, if he really had an ego issue at Audi, or if he had an issue with the managerial staff at Audi, then going to Aston Martin kind of looks like the grass is greener on the other side kind of situation. So if he does end up at Aston Martin, it might not look the way he thought it was going to look. And he had a good thing going for him. I mean, they scored points on their debut. Yes, they had one car not start each race, but so did most teams. McLaren, two-time world champion in the last 2 years, and they didn't start Australia with one car, and they didn't start China at all. So everybody's facing reliability issues. That's normal, but they had such a good start to the season. I can't see this being about performance. This is totally due to some personal conflict between the team.
Now, Victor, I know we've had the rumors with Wheatley. We've had the rumors with Christian Horner. If you were Lawrence Stroll, what would you do? Would you keep Newey as team principal at Aston Martin, or would you put in Wheatley? Would you put in Horner? Or would you do something completely different?
Well, putting in Horner, let's not forget that the reason Adrian Newey left Red Bull was most likely to escape Christian Horner. And there have been rumors that Adrian Newey blocked Christian Horner joining the team in 2025 and also blocked him again in 2026. So if I was in Lawrence Stroll's position, what would he do? I mean, he's already announced that having Adrian Newey was always going to be a temporary position in the press release that they made last week. But that's the way that they operate. They are different here. But that doesn't work when you're not winning races. You can't just say that we do things differently and expect everybody to understand. If I were team principal there, I would look to bring in someone very experienced. And if it's Jonathan Wheatley, then it's Jonathan Wheatley. But also, Aston Martin has a whole load of ex-team principals that are still in their network that they can rely on. And he's looking Mike Crack look like an absolute saint.
Interesting perspective, Victor. Now let's head on to our podium predictions for the Japanese Grand Prix. Victor, hit me with your top three.
I think that Suzuka is going to be the first race of the season where the Ferraris are going to be able to split the Mercedes. Because this track is a little bit more driver focused and less of the car, I think that Charles Leclerc will be able to sneak into that P2 position. However, Mercedes has still been the very dominant car this season, and George Russell has been the very dominant driver. So I'm going to put George Russell P1, Charles Leclerc P2, and Kimi Antonelli P3, with the chance of Lewis Hamilton sniping that P3 spot from Kimi Antonelli.
Hey, if that happens, you don't gain your points. You said Kimi P3.
Yeah, that is true. I said Kimi P3.
But great takes, Victor. For me, I will keep predicting a Mercedes 1-2 until I'm proven wrong. So I will be saying George P1, Kimi P2, and I'm gonna say Max Verstappen P3, as I'm gonna believe that he is bringing some rage from being disqualified from his GT3 race last weekend, and put that all into his Red Bull car and try and fight for his first podium of the season.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to our Japan preview episode. We'll be back after the GP on Sunday with a recap episode early in the week. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment your predictions down below in the video in the comments, and we shall see you soon.
Goodbye.